What are some of the terrifying internet rabbit holes you've gone down? Story 1. For nearly 2 years, a Reddit account called Random Nubmer posted to a subreddit of the same name every day, sometimes multiple times, posting walls of hexadecimal code with zero context, zero explanation, and no response to any question anyone asked. The posts were consistent. They were organized. They were clearly produced by someone with the time, the knowledge, and the specific intent to do exactly this. Nobody noticed for almost a year. When the cryptography community finally did notice, it was hard. Subreddits formed specifically to crack the code. People with serious cryptographic credentials threw serious effort at it. The statistical properties of the posts were analyzed. Timestamps were logged. Post frequency patterns were charted. Some posts appeared to encode GPS coordinates. Some appeared to encode dates. None of it resolved into anything readable. And then, in 2016, the account posted a final message. The project was complete. The subreddit went private. The account went quiet. Nothing was explained. What was the project? What was being transmitted? Was it a communication to a specific recipient who had the key? Was it a very long-form artistic statement? Was it a test of some kind? Was it something operational that the account's silence is specifically protecting? The hexadecimal posts are still in Reddit's archives. They're still uncracked. The person who made them apparently knows exactly what they mean and has decided that you don't get to. Story 2. In 1939, British cryptographer Alexander Dagapayev published a book called Codes and Ciphers. At the end of it, almost as a footnote, he included a challenge cipher and invited readers to solve it. He didn't include the answer, presumably because that would defeat the purpose of a challenge. What he apparently didn't expect was that he would later forget how he made it. According to accounts from people who subsequently asked him about it, Dagapayev was unable to reconstruct his own ciphers method years later. The challenge he set for readers had become a challenge he couldn't solve himself. The cipher was removed from later editions of the book, quietly, with no explanation. It has never been solved. Professional cryptographers have worked on it. The NSA has people who do this professionally. The academic cryptography community has approached it with every statistical tool available. The specific structure of the cipher, its letter frequencies, its internal patterns, the way it resists the approaches that work on every other known cipher type, is consistent with either an extremely sophisticated method or with a method so idiosyncratic that it can only be solved by the person who invented it, and only while they still remember having invented it. Dagapayev died in 1986. Whatever method he used died with him, or possibly died earlier than that while he was still alive and unable to remember. There is a challenge cipher in a 1939 British textbook. The author couldn't solve it. Nobody else has either. It's 85 years old and counting. Story 3. In 1996, Usenet, the sprawling network of internet discussion groups that preceded modern social media, was flooded with messages. Not spam in the conventional sense. Something stranger. The messages repeated the same phrase, Markovian parallax denigrate. Around and between that phrase was a stream of grammatically broken, apparently random English words that read less like a message and more like a corrupted transmission. The kind of thing you'd get if you put text through a broken telephone several times and the signal kept dropping. The messages came from multiple accounts, spread across multiple news groups, and then stopped. No explanation was provided. No sender ever claimed credit or clarified purpose. The origin accounts were traced and found nothing. The content itself has been analyzed for decades and produced no consensus on what it represents. The theories run from the mundane to the genuinely strange. It was an early spam test. It was a Markov chain text generator being tested before those were common. It was a steganographic communication, a carrier signal for a hidden message that someone with the right key could extract. It was performance art. It was a coordinated test of Usenet's vulnerability to message flooding. It was something that made complete sense to whoever sent it and makes no sense to anyone who wasn't supposed to be the audience. The specific phrase, Markovian parallax denigrate, has never been explained. It's not a phrase from any known text. It doesn't correspond to any obvious technical term or cultural reference from 1996. It is 3 words that were apparently important enough to repeat thousands of times across the early internet and then never explain. Whatever it meant in 1996. Now, it just means itself. Story 4, the Voynich manuscript, is a 15th century illustrated codex written in an unknown script with pictures of plants that don't exist, astronomical diagrams of uncertain purpose, and human figures in pools connected by anatomical tubes. It has been studied by professional cryptographers, amateur linguists, machine learning systems, and the combined analytical firepower of internet mystery communities for 600 years and counting. It has not been read. The forums and subreddits devoted to solving it are their own rabbit hole, distinct from the manuscript itself. What you find there is a rotating cast of people, each absolutely certain they have cracked it, each presenting a theory that is internally coherent until someone finds the specific line of text that breaks it, each unable to explain why their reading doesn't match the 40 previous readings that were also internally coherent until they broke. The theories are extraordinary in their variety. It's a medieval herbal encoded in a simple substitution cipher. It's an invented language with no underlying real language to decode. It's a constructed hoax with no semantic content at all. Beautiful, meaningless text designed specifically to look like it means something. It's a phonetic transcription of a known language using invented glyphs. It's an encoded text in a real language that used a now extinct cipher type. It's a record of female knowledge, medical, botanical, reproductive, encoded specifically to prevent male authorities from understanding it. Each of these theories has competent, serious, credentialed proponents. None of them agree with each other. The manuscript sits in Yale's Beinecke Library and refuses to resolve, and the forums keep arguing, and nobody knows whether the answer is buried in one of these competing theories or whether it's something nobody has thought of yet. Story 5, on January 4th, 2012, an image appeared on 4chan. Plain white black text, "Hello. We are looking for highly intelligent individuals. To find them, we have devised a test. There is a message hidden in this image. Find it." 3301. What followed was a puzzle of a scale and sophistication that professional cryptographers describe as genuinely impressive. The image contained steganographically hidden text. That text led to a URL. The URL contained a cipher. The cipher led to a phone number. The phone number's recording contained Morse code. The Morse code produced coordinates. At those coordinates, in cities across 5 countries, including Warsaw, Miami, Seoul, and Sydney, physical QR code posters appeared on lampposts, some within hours of each other. Scanning the codes continued the chain. The puzzle ran for weeks, incorporating classical literature references, prime number theory, ancient Mayan numerology, original music that required spectral analysis to decode, and a final set of coordinates that led participants to a dark web page where they received a message that they had been found and should await contact. Then, it ended. Then it came back exactly a year later, on January 4th, 2013, then again in 2014. Nobody has ever credibly claimed to have created it. The people who reach the final stages have never publicly disclosed what they found there. The theories, intelligence agency recruitment, tech company talent screening, a private group of unknown purpose, have never been confirmed. The simultaneous placement of physical puzzles in 5 countries means significant organization and resources. Whoever did this wasn't operating alone. Whoever they recruited has stayed quiet. And whoever they are hasn't explained themselves. Story 6, between 2015 and 2016. A YouTube channel called Unfavorable Semicircle uploaded somewhere in the range of 70,000 videos, not over years, over roughly 1 year, at a rate that implied automation. Each video was short, Each featured a distorted or synthesized robotic voice, reading what appeared to be single characters or words over static imagery. No two videos were obviously identical. No individual video had any apparent standalone meaning. YouTube eventually terminated the channel. By then, the internet mystery community had been trying to crack it for months. The approaches applied included everything that had worked on other mysteries of this type: statistical analysis of the audio content, frame-by-frame examination of the visual content for hidden imagery, mapping of upload timestamps for encoded patterns, cataloging of the specific characters spoken across thousands of videos to identify statistical regularities. Some researchers concluded individual videos might encode single characters of a much larger message. Some concluded the upload timestamps encoded information. Some concluded it was automated noise generation with no content. What nobody found was a definitive answer. The channel appeared to be connected to another account called UF's Core, which produced posts that seemed to extend the mystery, but the connection itself was never confirmed, and UF's Core similarly produced no resolution. 70,000 videos. An account that uploaded constantly for roughly a year. Termination without explanation. No one who made it has ever claimed credit. No one who watched it solved it. The archive of what was there before termination is incomplete. Whatever unfavorable semicircle was communicating, if it was communicating anything, is sitting in a terminated archive that can only be partially reconstructed. Story 7 Kanye Quest 3030 is exactly what it sounds like. A goofy 2013 RPG-style game where you play as Kanye West, battling other rappers in turn-based combat, navigating a pixelated world full of jokes. It was made to be funny. It worked. People played it, laughed at it, and mostly moved on. Except that if you typed a send into a specific dialogue box during a specific conversation in the game, you were taken to a completely different game hidden inside it. Not a secret level, not a bonus area, a different tone, a different visual style, and a completely different narrative about consciousness, reality, and the nature of digital existence, structured like a cult recruitment guide. Communicating in a register that had nothing to do with the Kanye rap battle game sitting on top of it. The hidden content referenced specific philosophical frameworks about simulation and consciousness and the nature of digital life, with a specific point of view expressed consistently across a large amount of hidden material. It was not a joke. The joke game contained something that was not joking. The person who made Kanye Quest 3030 has never fully explained the hidden section. The fan community that discovered and has been mapping it has produced enormous amounts of analysis, lore documents, frame comparisons, philosophical interpretations, without arriving at a consensus answer for what the creator was doing. The game is free to download. The hidden door is real. Type a send and see what you find. The interpretation is up to you. Story 8 in 2010, a Reddit user named Yay Video Games posted something. The specifics of what they posted depend on which account you're reading. The original post is gone, the documentation is fragmentary, and the specific content has been described differently in different places. What's consistent across accounts is the texture of it. Bizarre, ominous, not comprehensible in the way that a joke post or a troll post typically is. Something that read as an outburst from inside a context nobody watching had. The account then vanished. Not banned, just gone. No subsequent activity, no further posts, no explanation. This would be entirely forgettable, except for the specific quality of what was there. The people who saw it and who have subsequently described it consistently note a specific affect. The sense that whatever was being said made complete sense to the person saying it and no sense to anyone reading it. Not deliberately cryptic, not performing mystery, just someone whose interior context was not the one you were reading from. Internet mystery communities tried to investigate and found very little to investigate. The post was gone too fast, archived too incompletely, described too inconsistently across second-hand accounts to reconstruct with confidence. What remains is a description of something that happened and left no trace except people's memory of it, which is itself inconsistent. This is the category of internet mystery that's most genuinely mysterious to me, not the elaborate puzzle with a creator behind it, but the thing that happened once and is now mostly gone, and whatever it was, we can't get back to it. Story 9, The Lost Media Community, is built around a genuinely alarming fact about recorded history. An enormous amount of early film, early television, early radio recordings, and early internet content simply doesn't exist anymore. Not because anyone decided to destroy it, though in the BBC's case, people very much did decide to destroy it, taping over early Doctor Who and other programs to reuse expensive magnetic tape. More often because nobody thought it would matter. The BBC is the most famous example. Before the cultural significance of television archives was understood, the BBC wiped hundreds of episodes of programs it considered low-value ephemera. Several complete series of Doctor Who, episodes of classic comedies, significant chunks of early television history. Gone. Not because of malice, but because tape was expensive and storage was not prioritized. The lost media community tracks what's missing, investigates where surviving copies might be, and coordinates recovery efforts when something surfaces. And things do surface. Tapes in the collections of people who recorded off-air, foreign archives that preserved programs the producing country didn't, estate sales with unlabeled reels, old broadcast stations clearing storage. The recoveries are treated as genuine events. When a long-thought lost episode of a beloved program turns up, the community documents it, verifies it, and celebrates it as what it is. The recovery of something that the culture thought was permanently gone. It is genuinely wholesome detective work happening in a corner of the internet that most people don't know exists. It's also a reminder that the things we assume are permanent records of our culture are, in a lot of cases, more fragile than anyone planned for. Story 10, Ted the Caver, is a website created in the early 2000s documenting, in first-person forum diary style, an account of Ted and his friends exploring a small, previously unknown cave they discovered on private land in Colorado. The story begins as exactly what it appears to be: amateur cavers excited about finding a tight, winding passage that seems to go somewhere nobody has been, and gradually becomes something else as strange carvings appear in the rock. The party starts having physical symptoms they can't explain, and the overall tone shifts from adventure documentation to something approaching dread. It's fiction. This is documented. Ted the Caver is a creative project by a man named Angel Wyatt, and the cave, while real, didn't contain what the website describes. The photos are real. The cave is real. The gradual discovery of strange symbols and the deteriorating psychological state of the explorers is not. But here's what makes it a rabbit hole. People still don't know it's fiction when they first find it. The website's format is old enough, its visual presentation is authentic enough, and its content is grounded enough in real amateur caving culture that first-time readers in 2024 encounter it as a real diary, and frequently don't realize it's fiction until they go looking. Ted the Caver predates the term creepypasta by years. It established the specific format: first-person documentation, photographs, escalating strangeness presented in mundane, domestic terms that became the template for almost all internet horror fiction that followed it. Blair Witch does it for film. Ted does it for the internet. And it still fools people. Consistently, decades after it was made. Story 11, starting in 2013, a YouTube channel called WebDriver Torso began uploading videos, thousands of them. The videos were short, typically about 11 seconds, and consisted of colored rectangles appearing against a white background, accompanied by beeping tones. Nothing else. No titles that meant anything. No description. No community engagement. Videos uploaded with robotic regularity at a rate that suggested automation. By the time anyone noticed, there were tens of thousands of videos. The internet mystery community did what it does. It analyzed the color patterns. It charted the rectangle positions. It ran Fourier transforms on the audio tones. It mapped upload timestamps. It contacted the channel. The theories were specific and escalating. The colors encoded information. The tones were a cipher. The timestamps revealed a schedule. The whole thing was a surveillance system, or a communication network, or a government test, or an intelligence operation. The reality, when it emerged, was considerably less dramatic. WebDriver Torso was a Google internal testing channel used by YouTube's engineering teams to automatically test video upload and encoding functionality. The colored rectangles were test patterns. The tones were test audio. The regularity was the regularity of automated quality assurance systems. The channel was eventually made public by Google after the speculation got large enough to be awkward. The WebDriver Torso story is one of the most useful data points in internet mystery epistemology. An industrial-scale content generation process, operated by a large tech company for entirely mundane purposes, was interpreted by a large community of investigators as a sophisticated cryptographic system for over a year. The pattern-finding machinery that finds genuine mysteries and genuine puzzles is the same machinery that finds patterns in engineering test footage. The door marked "No Entry" had a server room behind it. Story 12 on December 1st, 1948. An unidentified man was found dead on Somerton Beach near Adelaide, Australia. He was well dressed. He had no identification. The cause of death was determined to be poisoning, but no poison was detected in his body by the methods available at the time, and no evidence of how the poison might have been administered was found. Sewn into a hidden pocket in his trousers was a small piece of paper. On it, 2 words in Persian, "Tamam shud," roughly translating to finished or ended. The paper was eventually traced to a rare edition of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. An unknown person had handed a copy of that edition to police, saying they'd found it in their unlocked car near the beach. On the back cover of that copy was a phone number, a woman's name that has never been fully disclosed publicly, and what appeared to be a code, a series of letters in no known language that has never been deciphered. The woman whose phone number was written in the book was found but denied knowing the man, then gave an account that didn't satisfy investigators. A cold case review decades later used DNA analysis to suggest the Somerton man may have been a relative of hers, which would make her denial either a lie or a profound coincidence. Theories about who he was, what the code means, and what finished referred to have sustained dedicated communities on Reddit, in academic papers, and in podcasts for decades. A 2022 DNA analysis produced a lead on his identity, possibly a man named Carl Webb, but the identity isn't fully confirmed, and the code still hasn't been cracked. 75 years later, mostly answered. Nothing closed. Story 13 on August 15, 1977, astronomer Jerry Eman was reviewing data from the Big Ear radio telescope at Ohio State University and found something in the printout that made him circle it with a red marker and write "Wow" next to it. The printout showed a narrowband radio signal at 1420 megahertz, the frequency of neutral hydrogen emission, considered by SETI researchers to be the most logical frequency for interstellar communication, because any technological civilization would know it. That was 30 times stronger than background noise and lasted for 72 seconds. It has never been detected again, despite numerous targeted searches of the same region of sky. The specific frequency, the specific duration, the specific intensity, and the specific signal pattern are all consistent with what a genuine extraterrestrial transmission would look like, and inconsistent with any known natural astrophysical phenomenon, though various explanations have been proposed over the decades. A 2016 paper proposed that 2 comets might account for it. The analysis was reviewed and found insufficient to explain all the signal's characteristics by multiple researchers who examined it. The most comprehensive 2020 analysis of the original data found no conclusive natural explanation. There are dedicated amateur astronomy forums that have been arguing origin theories for 47 years. The signal is the strongest candidate for an artificial extraterrestrial radio signal ever detected. It happened once. Nobody knows where it came from. If it came from where it appeared to come from, the constellation Sagittarius, it would have originated from a point in the galaxy where the signal could travel for tens of thousands of years before reaching us. Jerry Amon's handwritten "Wow" is still attached to the printout in the Ohio State University archive. Story 14. Since the 1980s, small, roughly tile-sized plaques have been appearing embedded in the asphalt of street intersections across several major American cities, primarily Philadelphia, New York, Boston, and Washington, D.C. The tiles contain text, typically referencing Toynbee idea and resurrect dead on planet Jupiter, often alongside hostile messages directed at the media and at specific journalists. They are embedded in the asphalt, not placed on top of it, requiring either access to construction processes or the kind of long-term patient insertion technique that involves laying tiles in traffic over months and letting them get driven into the surface. A 2011 documentary called Resurrect Dead investigated the tiles and concluded, based on significant investigative work, that they were likely the work of a Philadelphia man named Sevi Verna, who died in 2003. Verna was a recluse who had a ham radio show in the 1980s where he discussed similar ideas and who left cryptic material that connected to the tile content. But Verna, being the creator, is not confirmed with certainty, and new tiles have continued to appear after his death, either placed by someone who carried on his work, or by someone who was inspired by him, or by someone who was never identified, and whose relationship to Verna and to the original tile campaign is unknown. There is an entire online community that maps, photographs, and documents the tiles. They update when new tiles appear. They argue about attribution and meaning. And somewhere in American city streets, physically embedded in the pavement you walk across, is a 40-year campaign to communicate something about resurrection and Jupiter by someone whose identity is only mostly resolved. Story 15. This one is in a different category from most items on this list, because it's not mysterious in a way that implies hidden meaning. It's mysterious in the way that genuine one-person obsessions are mysterious when you encounter them from the outside. Someone, one person, one account, spent years copying and pasting the same request across dozens of unrelated internet forums. The request was specific. They were looking for images or clips of cartoon characters getting electrocuted in a way that showed their skeleton through their skin. The specific visual of the electrocuted skeleton reveal is a standard cartoon trope. Tom and Jerry, Looney Tunes, dozens of others use it. The person wanted it, specifically, and they wanted help finding more of it. The posts were copy-pasted. The phrasing was identical or nearly identical. The accounts were clearly all the same person. A DeviantArt account eventually surfaced that was also clearly the same person, and that confirmed this was a genuine sustained interest rather than a troll or performance. What's interesting about this isn't the content of the interest, it's the quality of discovering a sustained single-person obsession distributed across the whole internet over years, and the specific experience of realizing that every forum it appeared in experienced it as a one-off oddity, when actually they were each one node in a network that the obsessed person was patiently building. The internet contains a lot of these, not mysterious in the traditional sense, quietly strange in a way that's harder to name. Story 16, the cephalopod spiral. Someone lost 2 weeks to octopus biology and came out the other side. Change. This is not a mystery, and it is not scary. It is on this list because the experience it describes of stumbling into a corner of biology you had no idea existed and spending 2 weeks unable to leave is one of the more reliably reproducible rabbit holes on the internet, and because the specific subject is genuinely as strange as the person who described it said it was. Octopuses are colorblind. Their skin contains thousands of photoreceptors, light-sensitive cells, arranged in patterns that allow the skin itself to potentially perceive color directly. bypassing the visual system entirely. Their neurons are distributed throughout their body, rather than centralized in a brain. Roughly 2/3 of an octopus's neurons are in its arms, which can operate semi-autonomously, solving problems independently of whatever the central brain is doing. They can open jars. They recognize individual human faces. They play. They have been observed carrying coconut shells long distances to use as portable shelter later, tool use planned in advance, for future contingencies. An octopus is an animal that evolved intelligence entirely independently of the vertebrate lineage. The last common ancestor between an octopus and a human is something like a flatworm. Every complex cognitive capability they have developed along a completely different evolutionary path from ours. The person who called them freaky little aliens with unsettling superpowers and lost 2 weeks to the biology is correct. If you open a tab right now and start reading about octopus neurology, you will close your laptop a different amount of time later than you intended, and you will not regret it. Story 17, The Sailor's Thread. Unexplained ocean experiences told in a matter-of-fact tone that makes them stranger there is a recurring yearly thread on Reddit, in r/askreddit or adjacent communities, resurfacing annually, where merchant mariners, Navy veterans, and offshore workers share unexplained experiences at sea. The thread reliably generates accounts from people who have the specific credibility of professional sea time and the specific register that comes with it. Understated, technical, not reaching for drama, describing things that are strange because the person saying them is clearly not trying to make them seem strange. The format is the thing. When a former merchant mariner describes something in the same tone they'd use for a routine weather incident, flat, specific, occasionally using jargon that grounds it in genuine professional context, the strangeness of the content lands differently than it does when the same content arrives packaged as a horror story. The accounts include lights underwater in water depths where no lit submersible should be, sounds at sea that matched no known source, not the bloop's specific character, but sounds that experienced sailors with many ocean crossings couldn't place. Objects at sea that moved in ways inconsistent with current or wind, fog events that behaved in localized ways that didn't match the surrounding weather, entries in ship logs from previous crews that didn't correspond to any known incident. None of these are individually confirmable, but the thread's specific quality, the accumulation of accounts from people who have spent serious time at sea, told without embellishment, in the specific register of someone reporting a professional observation rather than telling a scary story, produces something that straight-up horror fiction doesn't. The ocean is mostly unexplored. The people who work on it see things. They generally don't make a big deal of it. Story 18, The Bloop. A sound loud enough to be heard across the Pacific, mostly explained. Never fully closed in the summer of 1997. The NOAA's Autonomous Hydrophone Arrays, an underwater microphone network designed to monitor for submarine activity and natural ocean sounds, detected an enormous, ultra-low-frequency sound near the southern end of South America. The sound, which they called the bloop, was detected on multiple hydrophones separated by thousands of miles, meaning the source was extraordinarily powerful at low frequency. Its frequency profile roughly matched the signature of a biological source. Specifically, it matched the rough profile of a very large animal. This is the part the internet latched onto and ran with, producing years of "there's something enormous" in the Pacific theorizing. NOAA later attributed the bloop to a cryoseism, an ice quake, the fracturing and movement of large Antarctic ice masses, which can produce sounds with profiles that superficially resemble biological sources. The scientific community accepted this explanation. The conspiracy boards and mystery communities have never fully let it go. What makes the bloop interesting in retrospect is the original reaction. NOAA researchers themselves initially described the profile as consistent with biological origin in their published reporting on the event, because that's genuinely what the data suggested at the time. The ice quake explanation came later, as more data about the specific acoustic signatures of large ice events became available. The bloop was never a giant unknown creature. It was ice. But for a period of years, NOAA's own scientists described it in terms that made the creature interpretation reasonable rather than irrational, because the science was catching up to the data rather than ahead of it. The internet forums kept the mystery alive longer than the data warranted. They also kept a legitimate scientific question visible while the science was still working on it. Both things are true. Story 19, the most mysterious song on the internet, a 1980s radio recording that 30 years of collective investigation hasn't identified someone recorded a song off German radio in the 1980s. The recording is decent quality. The song is catchy, a clearly professional production with a real band and real studio work behind it. The tape sat around for years until someone digitized it and put it online around 2007, asking if anyone could identify it. Nobody could. This has been investigated with extraordinary collective effort for roughly 17 years. The investigation community has analyzed the audio for clues about the recording equipment and studio techniques that would narrow down the production era and country, consulted with people who worked at German radio stations in the relevant period, reviewed databases of obscure European music releases from the 1980s, debated whether the lyrics are in German, a Romance language, or something non-lexical, posted the recording to communities of musicians who specialize in identifying exactly this kind of obscure European new wave, cross-referenced sonic characteristics with known bands to narrow down possible producers. Nothing, no match, no identification. No one has come forward to say I know this song in a way that held up to verification. The investigation subreddit for this specific song has been continuously active for years. There are people in it who have spent more cumulative hours on this recording than on most of their professional work. The song remains unidentified. If you listen to it, you'll understand why it's compelling. It's good. It sounds like it should be findable. It sounds like the kind of song that someone else must know. The cognitive dissonance of a clearly real, clearly professional recording existing without any provenance is the specific thing that keeps people coming back to it. It's out there. Go listen. See if you know what it is. Story 20, Candle Cove. The origin story of a fictional childhood TV show that people swear they remember. Candle Cove is a short horror story by Chris Straub, published in 2009 in the format of a nostalgic internet forum thread. People reminiscing about a disturbing children's TV show they all seem to remember from childhood, sharing fragments of memory, gradually reconstructing a show that was apparently much more frightening than anyone remembered at the time, arriving at a revelation in the final post that recontextualizes everything that came before. It is fiction. Chris Straub wrote it. There was never a TV show called Candle Cove. What makes it a rabbit hole is what happened after it was published. People started saying they remembered it. Not this reminds me of memories. I watched this as a kid. I remember the skin taker. I remember being scared of it. Memories posted in various places online by people who either hadn't read the story carefully or who had and were playing along so well that their accounts were indistinguishable from genuine misremembered memory, or who had genuinely constructed false memories from the story's vivid detail. The Candle Cove phenomenon became a case study in false memory generation through fiction. The specific format of the story, fragmented, nostalgic, forum-style collaborative recall, is extraordinarily good at tricking the brain's memory reconstruction systems into treating the content as recovered rather than encountered. Your brain fills in childhood TV memories from a story the way it fills in the details of dreams, with the confident feeling of recognition rather than the uncertain feeling of reading something new. This is mildly terrifying in a way that has nothing to do with the story's actual horror content. Story 21, The Isdal Woman, a burned body, multiple identities, and a cold case Norway is still officially investigating. In November 1970, a badly burned body was found in the Isdalen Valley near Bergen, Norway, in an area known locally as the Death Valley for the number of incidents there. The woman's face had been partly destroyed by fire. Her belongings were burned separately nearby. Her labels had been removed from all her clothing. A backpack near the body contained a melted bottle of liquor and personal items whose serial numbers had been filed off. The investigation found that she had been traveling across Europe for weeks using multiple aliases and multiple passports, speaking multiple languages fluently to different people, switching hotels frequently, and behaving in patterns consistent with surveillance tradecraft rather than ordinary tourism. She'd been described as surveilling military installations. Several people who encountered her noted she seemed under stress and possibly being followed. The Norwegian police concluded she had been murdered, and the scene staged to resemble suicide. No government has ever confirmed her affiliation with any intelligence service. No government has ever publicly identified her. Na has been analyzed, and her identity was publicly narrowed to a specific geographic origin, possibly Central Europe, but her name remains officially unknown. A 2017 podcast and associated Anarch investigation reopened the case, gathered new witnesses, and made significant progress on her movements, enough to produce additional attention and additional analysis. The Norwegian police stated the investigation is still officially open. A burned body in a valley, filed off serial numbers, multiple identities, the hallmarks of intelligence work with no intelligence service claiming her. 1970, still open. Still officially identified as unknown. Story 22 number stations. Shortwave radio has been broadcasting encrypted messages to spies for 50 years, and only some of it is confirmed if you have a shortwave radio, and you know which frequencies to search, you will find them. Broadcasts of automated voices reading strings of numbers, in patterns that repeat and then change, at scheduled intervals, from transmitters whose locations have been tracked to specific government facilities in Russia, Cuba, North Korea, China, and the United States, among others. Number stations are real. The intelligence agencies that use them are real. The one-time pad encryption that makes their transmissions unbreakable without the physical key is real. The Cold War history of shortwave espionage communication is documented. What's not documented, officially, in most cases, is which station belongs to which agency, what specific transmissions have meant, or which specific operations they supported. The documentation comes from defectors, from declassified records in countries that have been more forthcoming than others, and from the sustained monitoring work of hobbyist communities like the Spooks mailing list and its successors, who have been logging, identifying, and cataloging number station transmissions for decades. The Cuban number station Atención was confirmed as a Cuban intelligence broadcast in U.S. federal court during the Cuban 5 spy trial, which is one of the cleaner confirmations in the record. Others are attributed based on triangulation, voice recognition across different broadcasts, and frequency coordination patterns that point to specific origin countries without producing the same level of direct legal confirmation. Some stations that were active during the Cold War are still broadcasting. The UV-76 buzzer in Russia broadcasts a continuous tone punctuated by voice messages that have increased in frequency around major geopolitical events. The Lincolnshire poacher, attributed to Britain's GHQ, was broadcasting from Cyprus until 2008. The infrastructure for encrypted shortwave spy communication is still running. You can listen to it right now. Story 23, the SEEP Wiki and Why It's Best Horror Works. Bureaucratic language about things that shouldn't exist. The SEEP Foundation is a collaborative fiction wiki that presents itself as a secret government organization, cataloging anomalous objects and entities, things that violate the laws of nature and that would be dangerous if publicly known. The wiki has over 6,000 entries. It has been running since 2008. The best entries are genuinely disturbing in ways that straight horror fiction usually isn't, and it's worth understanding why the format works. The entries are written in bureaucratic procedural language, containment procedures, classification levels, clinical descriptions of anomalous properties, effects of exposure, personnel requirements. The writing style is the style of government documents, insurance reports, safety briefings. It's dry, it's precise, it doesn't reach for emotional effect. And then the content is something like an anomalous concrete humanoid that kills everyone within visual range who blinks, contained only by a team of personnel required to maintain unbroken eye contact at all times, rotating in shifts, with specific protocols for what happens if more than one person on the team blinks simultaneously. The bureaucratic register describing something that monstrous is exactly why it works. The cognitive dissonance between the mundane document format and the content being documented creates the horror better than any explicitly frightening prose would. Your brain applies the normal world meaning of a government safety briefing to content that has no normal world meaning, and the gap is the thing that unsettles you. The CP Foundation established a creative format that has influenced internet horror significantly since 2008. The specific innovation is that the horror isn't in the telling. It's in the gap between how the thing is described and what the thing is. Story 24, the Dyatlov Pass Incident. 9 experienced hikers. 1 tent cut from the inside. Official conclusion. Unknown compelling force. In January 1959, 9 experienced Soviet ski hikers established camp on the eastern slope of a mountain in the northern Urals. Something caused all 9 of them to cut or tear their way out of their tent from the inside and run into temperatures below 30 C in various states of undress. Without their cold weather gear, they all died. The Soviet investigation concluded with the characterization that the hikers had been killed by an unknown compelling force. This is the conclusion. That's what the investigation found. Something made 9 experienced winter hikers abandon a functioning tent in the middle of a polar night in sub-zero temperatures and run toward a forest a kilometer away without their clothes on. Nobody knows what. 3 of the 9 had severe internal traumatic injuries, fractured ribs, a fractured skull, with tissue damage inconsistent with blunt external force, but consistent with an enormous compressive force of the kind produced by a high-speed impact or an explosion. 1 was missing her tongue and eyes. Russia officially reopened the investigation in 2019 and concluded in 2020 that an avalanche caused the deaths. Critics of this conclusion point to specific terrain and snow depth evidence from the original investigation that doesn't support the avalanche theory, and the forensic injuries that don't match avalanche casualties. The case has generated a genuinely vast body of amateur and professional investigation. The theories range from classified Soviet weapon tests to infrasound from the terrain, causing panic, to a much simpler explanation that the original investigators missed. None of them fully account for all the documented evidence. 9 experienced hikers, 1 tent cut from the inside, an official conclusion of unknown compelling force. 1959, still genuinely unresolved. Story 25, the Black Dahlia, a 77-year-old murder that generated more investigation than almost any other cold case. Elizabeth Short was 22 years old when her body was found in a Los Angeles vacant lot on January 15, 1947, bisected at the waist, completely drained of blood, with surgical precision cuts on her face and marks suggesting she had been held elsewhere and cleaned before being posed. Publicly, the newspapers called her the Black Dahlia. The Lapt investigated extensively. Nobody was ever charged. The case attracted confessions, over 150 of them from people who said they did it. None were credible enough to prosecute. The sheer volume of false confessions created its own investigative problem, diluting the evidentiary record with noise that was harder to dismiss than to account for. What makes the Black Dahlia a persistent rabbit hole is the specific forensic character of the murder. The surgical bisection, the complete exsanguination, and the deliberate public display suggests specific capabilities and a specific purpose, staging, communication, demonstration of something that generate theories about motive and perpetrator more readily than most murders. because the murder itself communicates something that hasn't been decoded. Researchers across the decades have named specific suspects with specific evidence that is compelling enough to take seriously and insufficient to close the case. A 2003 book by Steve Hodel named his own father a physician with evidence significant enough to prompt formal lapped review. The review didn't result in a definitive conclusion. The Lapp's Black Dahlia file is vast. The case is technically still open. The specific quality of the crime, clearly deliberate, clearly communicating something, clearly involving specific knowledge and capability, ensures it will remain investigated for as long as any investigator finds it interesting. Which is, apparently, indefinitely. Story 26, the lead masks case. 2 men dead on a hill in Brazil, wearing lead masks and carrying instructions to wait for a signal on August 17, 1966. A boy flying a kite on Morro do Vintum Hill near Niterói, Brazil found 2 bodies. The men were well-dressed, suits and raincoats, lying next to each other, each wearing a crude lead-eye mask of the kind you'd make from a sheet of lead if you needed to block a specific type of radiation. A notebook nearby contained instructions. At a specific time, ingest capsules, protect metals, await a signal while wearing the masks. The cause of death was never officially established. The autopsies detected no poison, though the toxicology methods available in 1966 were limited. There were no signs of trauma, no witness to how they got there. The masks had no obvious commercial source. The context that makes this genuinely strange rather than simply sad. Brazil in the 1960s had an active and documented culture of spiritual groups who believed in extraterrestrial contact and who used specific practices, including ingesting substances and using protective equipment, to prepare for communication with off-world intelligences. The lead masks fit the documented discourse of these groups about protecting against radiation associated with spacecraft or contact events. Whether the 2 men died in a failed contact attempt, an accidental overdose of an undetermined substance, or something else is genuinely unknown. Whether the instructions in the notebook were from a group, a leader, or a belief system they had developed themselves is unknown. Whether anyone else was supposed to be there and wasn't is unknown. The case is well documented in Brazilian police records. The answers are not 2 men in suits with lead masks and a notebook dead on a hill, and nobody has explained it in 57 years. Story 27, the Rendlesham Forest Incident, a multi-night UFO encounter at a British nuclear base with a coded message decoded 30 years later. In late December 1980, U.S. Air Force personnel stationed at RAF Woodbridge in Suffolk, England reported encountering an unidentified craft over 3 consecutive nights in the adjacent Rendlesham Forest. The encounters were reported by multiple witnesses, including senior officers. Physical evidence at the scene included ground impressions and radiation readings higher than background. The deputy base commander, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, recorded audio of his own investigation on a cassette tape that was subsequently made public. This much is documented, and the witnesses are credentialed enough that the Rendlesham incident is consistently cited as one of the better evidenced UAP cases in the record. What makes it specifically strange as a rabbit hole is the Staff Sergeant Jim Peniston component. Peniston was one of the first responders on the first night and claimed he touched the craft and received a download of binary code into his mind. He wrote the binary sequences in his notebook immediately after. The notebook has been authenticated as contemporaneous. In 2010, a researcher decoded the binary sequences as coordinates in text, the coordinates pointing to specific locations, the text being a message that various people have interpreted variously. Peniston's account is the most extraordinary element of an already extraordinary case, and whether the decoded binary is what he says it is, or a subsequent elaboration of symbols he wrote for other reasons, is something different investigators conclude differently. The UK Ministry of Defence dismissed the incident. The witnesses maintained their accounts. The audio recording of Colonel Halt's investigation still exists. The notebook is real. The coordinates point somewhere. Story 28, ship logs and night watches. The things merchant mariners write down that sound like they weren't supposed to there is a specific category of internet content produced by people who work at sea. Merchant mariners, offshore platform workers, research vessel crew that has a quality different from most reported strange experiences. The specificity, the professional register, and the matter-of-fact tone of the accounts creates a different kind of credibility than explicitly dramatic first-person ghost stories. The accounts you find in the relevant Reddit communities and sailing forums include lights observed moving at depth in water too deep for any lit submersible, sounds detected on hydroacoustic monitoring that match no known biological or mechanical source, navigation anomalies where GPS and radar were giving incompatible readings in open water with no atmospheric explanation, phenomena observed on watch at night at sea that the experienced crew member reporting it cannot categorize and doesn't try to dramatize. What the professional register does is remove the storytelling conventions. An experienced mariner reporting something strange sounds like an experienced mariner reporting a routine observation they don't have a category for, rather than like someone telling a scary story. The absence of dramatic framing is, paradoxically, more unsettling than the presence of it would be. The ocean is mostly unmonitored. The people who work on it are in a small, lit space surrounded by an enormous dark one for extended periods. What they observe, and what they choose to write down, and what they choose to post about online is a sample from a population of observations that mostly don't get recorded. The specific things that are strange enough to prompt a post from someone who doesn't post about strange things are the ones worth paying attention to. Story 29, the internet's most disturbing searches. What people look for at Thram when they think nobody's watching there are studies of search engine data, specifically studies from the era when Google and others published aggregated search query data more openly, that document the specific things people search for at night, when the barrier between what we think and what we type is lower than during daylight hours. The searches are not primarily for illegal content. They're primarily for things that people are ashamed to want to know about during daylight hours. Medical symptoms they're frightened of. Questions about relationships they can't ask anyone in their life. Information about things they've done or thought about that they can't discuss with anyone who knows them. The aggregated pattern of nighttime searches, when someone has looked carefully at it, is less a horror story and more a portrait of the specific loneliness of being a person. The specific fears, shames, and curiosities that people carry without being able to express them anywhere except an anonymized query box at Thram reveal less about the darkness of humanity and more about the volume of inner life that most people have nowhere to put. The internet is sometimes experienced as making people lonely by providing shallow connection. The nighttime search data suggests a different mechanism. The internet is where people ask the questions they can't ask anyone else. The problem isn't that the medium is shallow. It's that the answers to Thram questions are often inadequate, regardless of what the medium provides. The most terrifying thing in this rabbit hole is not what people search for. It's what their searching reveals about what they're carrying around without being able to say to anyone. Story 30, the wow. Signal redux. What if we sent a response and nobody told us? The wow. Signal is covered elsewhere on this list as a documented anomaly. This entry is about the rabbit hole that branches from it, the question of what we've done about it. The official SETI response to the wow signal is that targeted follow-up observations of the relevant sky region have been conducted without a repeat detection. This is accurate. It is also the expected response from official SETI if a decision had been made that the response to a confirmed extraterrestrial signal is not a public question. The rabbit hole begins here. Contact with an extraterrestrial civilization is the most significant event in human history. The specific implications, religious, political, philosophical, economic, are enormous and genuinely unpredictable. A government or institution that detected a confirmed signal would face an immediate decision about whether to disclose, when, how, and with what preparation for the response. The specific claim is not that contact has been made. It's that if contact had been made and if a responsible party had determined that premature public disclosure was destabilizing, the scenario would look identical from the outside to what we currently observe. Occasional anomalies in the astronomical record, official statements that the anomalies are unresolved, and continued monitoring that is partly about continuing to look and partly about managing the information environment around what's already been found. This is unfalsifiable from the outside. That's the specific character of the rabbit hole. Not that it's true, it's probably not true, but that you can't rule it out from the data that's publicly available, and that the scenario in which it is true produces exactly the publicly available data that we observe. That gap is uncomfortable, and it doesn't close. Story 31 Goetze and the specific archaeology of what the early internet traumatized people with the early internet had a category of shock content that was passed around through links with misleading descriptions, images designed to surprise, disgust, or disturb the viewer, shared as pranks, as initiation rituals, as tests of reaction. The most famous of these was goats, an image that will not be described here, but that anyone who was online between roughly 1999 and 2010 has either seen or heard about in terms that made them actively avoid seeing. The specific rabbit hole this opens into is an archaeology of how internet culture managed trauma before it had language for managing internet trauma. The people who were exposed to these images, often as teenagers, often without warning, often in contexts where reporting the experience to adults was impossible because explaining it would require showing it, processed them without framework. The internet was new. The specific harm of being ambushed by graphic content that you didn't seek and couldn't unsee hadn't been named yet. The communities you'd process it with didn't exist yet. You saw it, and then you didn't have anywhere to put having seen it. What the rabbit hole uncovers when you go looking for accounts of this period is a generation that developed a kind of callus around a specific category of disturbing content through exposure rather than through any intentional harm reduction practice. The shock sites of the early internet are part of the reason that subsequent internet culture developed the content warning and the Ensfeld tag, because the absence of them, combined with the link-sharing culture of the early web, had documented effects on people who encountered them unprepared. The archaeology of early internet trauma is part of the archaeology of the internet itself. Story 32, the serial killer fan communities. True crime as parasocial relationship and what that reveals true crime as a genre is enormous and has been extensively discussed in terms of its ethical implications. The specific rabbit hole this entry is about is not the genre broadly, but the specific communities that form around individual perpetrators. The forums, the fan accounts, the letter-writing campaigns, and what the existence of these communities reveals about how parasocial relationship psychology works under extreme conditions. The specific question is not why do people find serial killers interesting. That's a question with extensive psychological literature behind it, involving the documented human attraction to danger from a position of safety, the specific cognitive engagement of trying to understand an extreme other, and the parasocial relationship dynamics that apply to celebrities of all kinds. The literature on this is substantive and isn't conspiracy. The specific question is what happens to parasocial psychology when the subject of the relationship is someone who committed documented atrocities, and the relationship is maintained in the face of that documentation. The fan communities that have formed around specific perpetrators display the same loyalty patterns, the same defensive response to criticism, and the same identification with the subject that fan communities around athletes and musicians display. The parasocial mechanism operates on the same circuitry regardless of the specific object. The brain doesn't have a special compartment for this as someone who did something horrific, and the relationship logic should be different. The rabbit hole reveals that the psychological machinery of human attachment doesn't have built-in ethics. It attaches. What it attaches to depends on what it's exposed to, and what narratives frame that exposure. This is not comfortable to discover, because it doesn't stay in the rabbit hole. It comes home with you.